And we're going to go back even further now. Let's go back. Should we go 150 million years ago? Take a look at this. Now, you're probably thinking this is taken from a fairy tale or a fantasy novel. Actually, this is an artist's impression of a creature that did exist in the Jurassic period.
Yeah, its remains have just been discovered by scientists in Australia who say that it is the closest thing that we have to a real-life dragon. They say the flying reptile would have had a 23-foot wingspan and a spear-like mouth filled with sharp teeth. I guess it didn't breathe fire, though, I suspect.
Well, we don't know that. Let's talk to paleontologist Dr. David Hone from Queen Mary University of London, who can tell us more. Good morning to you. I'm mega excited about the idea of a dragon on land, but I have been having a debate with everyone this morning. What's the definition of a dragon?
Well, they're mythological animals and so don't exist, of course. But pterosaurs, I think, would form something that would be pretty close to most people's, or at least in the Western, imagination of a dragon. The biggest of these had a 10-meter wingspan. They were reptiles and they were flying. That's quite close to what you see in most fantasy shows or books.
So is this similar to things that have been discovered before? I mean, you mentioned it's a pterosaur, so it fits into a family, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the pterosaurs were extinct flying reptiles that lived alongside the dinosaurs. Lots of people call them flying dinosaurs, but they're not. They're just very close relatives of them. And yeah, we know about 150 or so species from around the world. We found them on every continent, including Antarctica. And this new animal, Sapangaka, is from a group called ornithocheirids. And they're found, again, all over the place. In fact, we have quite a few in the UK.
OK, so let's put this into some terrifying perspective, shall we? One would be very grateful that we're 150 million years on. What would it have looked like? It had something like 40 teeth, 40 sharp teeth in a skull that was, what, more than a metre long? Yeah,
so they have huge heads and relatively small bodies. So in animals like the ornithocheirids, the head was about as big as the body, and the neck was a similar length as well. So you've got about a metre of head with, as you say, lots of teeth, the longest of which would have been 4 or 5 centimetres, a couple of inches long, about a metre of neck, and then about a metre of body, and then 3.5 metres of wing either side of that body.
And what would it have been hunting? How would it have, like, in the whole hierarchy of the land that time, where would it have stood or flown?
Well, not on land very much. So the ornithocheirids are very good analogues for things like modern gulls and albatross and frigate birds. So they're real transoceanic animals that are spending a lot of time out to sea, and that long jaw full of long, sharp teeth is there to catch fish. And we find specimens with fish inside them. We find specimens inside fish or sharks with shark teeth broken off in them. So they're definitely hanging around the ocean.
So would it, we haven't got the picture on at the moment, but if it was actually on, spent a lot of time out over water, let's have a look. Has it got feathers? It doesn't seem to have feathers. How did it float? How did it keep dry if it sat on the water?
Yeah, so at least a lot of pterosaurs and probably ornithocheirids had a feather-like filament, so they would have actually looked fluffy or downy. We don't know for this species or this group as a whole because we just don't have the right fossils for that, but it's very likely they had this too. And personally, I think they probably weren't spending a lot of time on the surface. In fact, I did some work on this a couple of years ago. Myself and my colleagues suggested that actually they'd at risk of drowning if they sat on the surface for too long because they float in a very odd posture. Yeah. But they were probably either sticking their heads into the water from the surface. They might have been able to dive a little bit. But I suspect mostly what they were doing is flying along and grabbing stuff close to the surface.
Fluffy and downy makes it sound almost cute, doesn't it?
Nearly, nearly.
Yeah, the little ones were very sweet. We have some little insectivores that have a wingspan only 60 or 70 centimetres and would have been small and fluffy. So they're pretty cute in comparison.
Second stupid question of this interview, because I did ask you the definition of a dragon, and you kindly, very kindly said they're mythological, which we don't know yet, let's face it. They had eggs. Were they? Were they? They're not mammals, are they?
No. So not all reptiles lay eggs. Some do give birth to live young. There's a bunch of lizards and snakes that do. But in the case of pterosaurs, we do have a handful of eggs. They're extremely rare because they're very, very thin shells. So they're much more like the eggs we get of modern turtles than the kind of hard bird's egg that we're used to.
How big are the eggs?
The largest ones we've got are about the size of a hen's egg, but they're from fairly modest-sized pterosaurs that were 3 or 4 meters in wingspan. I know that's not very modest compared to birds, But the really biggest pterosaurs had wingspans over 10 meters. They were probably about 350 kilos. Their eggs, I suspect, would have been quite a bit larger, but we haven't found any yet.
Have you not watched Jurassic Park?
I'd have to, and on a scale of 1 to 10, just how excited are you about this? And how exciting is this as a discovery?
Sapangaka is a really cool animal. There's not a massive amount of the fossil, unfortunately, but Australia in the last few years has started to produce more and more animals, both dinosaurs and pterosaurs. In fact, we had a new giant sauropod just a few weeks ago, Australotitan. There's a hell of a lot more to come from there in the coming decades. And so every extra bit that we get right now is really setting the scene. And this is only the third pterosaur that's been described from Australia. So there's going to be a lot more coming. And that's really cool. And it's hard not to be excited by a new pterosaur with a 7-meter wingspan.
Hey, listen, we're excited.
Yeah, absolutely.
David, thanks very much indeed. Dr. David Hone is a paleontologist from Queen Mary University of London.
Found a dragon. Ish. Headlines coming up.